say, we need this much for pre-production, we need this much for, yes?
Absolutely.
So
And that's happening all the time. Now, if you want to, yeah, that's a good point. And if you want to tier, and you're very clear about that, I would just say, if you're going to tier, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was in here thinking, but there is a middle ground. If you're going to tier, I encourage everybody to be very clear to your backers. If I cash out at $25,000, this will only get me to, we will do pre-production with that. So that there's no disappointment. You know, just the point is clarity
And just sort of related to that, especially with, you're saying you fund or work on projects that say $3 million. What if somebody had a slate of $1 million pictures? Is that something you would consider?
Yeah, well, no, that's just what yeah, sure.
Bring it up there.
Sure. I mean, it just depends on the project itself. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's the answer. It just has so much to do with the project, and right now it's starting to be just like anything else. It's talent driven. What's the talent involved?
And I would love for some of the producers here to really kind of tap into just talent in terms of, you know, attach talent to your project, but just do it on an option basis, so that, you know, should X, Y, and Z events happen, then you can exercise your option and then fully on attach talent. But that way you're not going all in, you know, at this very early stage. And I think that's a really good way to not only make your project look more attractive on the crowdfunding platform or any funding meeting that you may be having, but also, you know, you can really leverage your legal position and not have to go all in at that very early stage.
That's the problem right now. That's where the crux is, and I've been in meetings with agents the last several days. It's not the producers, it's not everybody else, it's not even the agents. It's the talent. And I understand it. They're very hesitant to want to step out on this playing field, and some are quite the opposite. I mean, pretty named talent who say, this will be fun, I'm going to connect with my
They want to do their own project.
Well, they know whether they want to participate in a larger films campaign.
Yeah.
I guarantee you in 5 years you're going to see much more talent,
Way less than 5,
as a
yeah.
producer or studio, using that celebrity cachet to get crowdfunded.
Right now, there are a bunch of little, you know, fragments that are right around the pool sticking their toes in. You can't decide if they want to.
Yeah, we had a question up here in the front row.
Yes, what about hybrid investment? For example, let's say I needed $300,000 to make my little movie. But I have an equity investor that's willing to put up $50,000 or $100,000, but they want to make sure that you know, everybody else is there, right? So what do I get them to put the money up on Kickstarter?
No, just you know, get it at escrow, make sure it's real, because you can get called on this if it's not real. But you can go out to your crowd and say, this is a 2-to-1 deal, or for every dollar you put in, I've got this guy, and make sure it's clear. That's the key. You've got to make sure that's real money sitting there. But that it's a 2-to-1 deal, or it's a matching program. I mean, we're starting to see that. We're doing that. You're going to start seeing that a lot more. And we're going to start coming out, just real quickly, I know I recognize a couple people that talk about documentaries in other sessions. You know, we've got a $4 million documentary right now we're looking at. And the first thing we said is, well, because it has to do with environmental issues. And, you know, so we started saying, well, how about Jeep? I mean, can we go to Jeep and get them to do a matching program and do advertising? And so, you know, there's some ideas that you can start looking at for who's that matching dollar. And I encourage you on your films, I hear this a lot of people come up and they talk about their films. If you start looking for who that matcher might be, if you have a cause-driven film, look over there. Maybe there's an NGO that might, you know, you could say for every $10 we raise towards this film, $1 will go to that NGO. And that NGO can turn around and then promote your film out to the social media. So there's interesting opportunities in the matching world. If you stop and think, it could suddenly open up new possibilities for your crowdfunding.
Especially because I think when David and I spoke earlier about the actual, you know, fine line approvals, it may be only up to $1 million per project on the equity side. So all of a sudden we are in this, in what the other David's talking about, in this world of having to be very creative.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's just, it's really opening up the doors. As you can see, we can get really creative on the financing here, and you know, signing a deal with an investor, maybe taking some cash up front into an escrow account, or even just having, again, kind of an option agreement, so that if you raise, you know, $50,000 on Kickstarter, he'll back it 2-to-1. Then you can go to your Kickstarters and say, hey guys, I got someone here that's going to, you know, back me 2-to-1. This is golden. And I think what's actually pretty phenomenal is that we should be thinking about brands as being those backers, those heavy backers. So
And that's a non-equity bearing funding usually.
Well, it's a lot
which always
easier,
helps,
it's a
right?
lot easier if you're going out to your investor instead of doing the standard, and I've done it, guys, I've been out there, I've raised money, you know, when you're doing the song and dance, you're telling them all your comps and why you think the movie's gonna do great and all these different things. It's a much different conversation to say, listen, don't listen to me about all that. If the crowd tells you it's a good film, will you come in?
Exactly.
That's all I'm asking you to do today, is just agree that if they come in, you'll come in.
And that's the best type of validation. The best type of validation from just like a straight ROI perspective. I can sell you on a movie idea or a product all day. I'm sure 10 other people can, or a small focus group. But you have 15,000 Facebook friends, or 18,000 people telling you, I want to see a beta for this product as soon as it's out. That's market validation like no other. And even in traditional financing, I tell a lot of entrepreneurs now, go out there and do some what I call pre-product launch marketing and get some market validation even in the concept stage. And when you go into an investor meeting and you have those 10,000 emails and a bunch of social media cachet, not only are you going to you have those Apple fanatics that are ready to deploy, but you also have a tremendous validation on your
So since you're a storyteller, you have to tell a story about your campaign that would then help you raise the money for your project, right? There has to be buzz around the campaign, and then there has to be a buzz around the project. So when we were packaging startups, the creating of that buzz was by talking to other investors, by talking to public at large, the consumers who are actually going to purchase the products from these digital media companies, and then by talking to the industry in general. And you still have to do all that here in order to get your projects funded, even in that first initial step of the campaigns. Do we have time for one more question, guys? We're okay, JR? Yeah, let's go back there.
I'm a little confused about something you touched on relatively tangentially earlier. You seem to be making the distinction between equity and debt, and you mentioned there are some sites that are driven by debt. I'm a lawyer, but not a securities lawyer. Isn't debt also something that is?
I'll tell you about the debt sites because they were on the panel last year. It's usually syndicating loans for small business deals where one bank doesn't want to take the risk. So let's say they syndicate to B of A syndicates to 10 other banks for them, gives them the loan, like vendor financing, and that's what the site facilitates for the banks. So the clients were banks and not necessarily the
Well, just so that the crowd should understand that you can't
Yes.
give out that
Good point.
any more than equity.
Yeah, equity or debt are both under the act. The SEC has to approve it.
Well, under the Jobs Act, it specifically includes debt as a security.
Yeah.
Securities, but we use equity a lot. It really should be called securities crowdfunding.
Makes sense. That's a very good point and distinction.
Those sites that are doing lending, there are sites that are doing lending
Right.
and equity, but there are the accredited investors
Yes.
or accredited.
Or the debt structure is done in a way that I actually don't know a lot about
They're
that.
servicing the debt,
Yeah.
the debt holders, yeah. But we have one more question back there. Sorry. Stuart, go ahead. You asked this question.
So when this happens, what are the instruments that you need to create? So what will your firm be creating? Do you still have to have the disclosure documents and the PPM document, the subscription agreement, all that kind of stuff? What's the shortcut? You still have to get some of that. And then just a little bit of a follow-on. Talent attachments. Is there actually any legal instrument that can be used to make that part of the package?
Part of the crowdfunding package.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, to answer your first question, in terms of, we're still putting it together in terms of what kind of compliance a company has to go through to be able to make this type of solicitation. It's going to be pretty clearly defined, and a lot of the portals that you'll be using will have a lot of the regulatory benchmarks built into them, so you have to go through certain approvals. But we're anticipating that it's going to be something like a small filing with the SEC, just to make sure that they know who you are and that this is a legitimate campaign to a certain degree. You'll probably have some kind of tax ID number and other kind of ways of being able to check. It's probably going to be, not as easy as people want it to be, but it's going to be a lot better than it is right now, obviously. So, you should budget a little bit for it. And also just on the same side, just traditionally when you're doing a movie or a startup, there's other legal issues besides just securities and crowdfunding that you want to address. Who owns your intellectual property? Do you have a corporation? What's your trademark issue? Are you contracting with other people? So, that's kind of a set of legal business. But I really foresee it. I mean, right now when clients come in and we have I don't like to, use a cookie cutter approach with every client, but we have a pretty good set of tasks that are pretty universal among most entertainment companies. And obviously we defray from that as we need to. And I really envision that we're just going to be able to incorporate a crowdfunding kind of product, if you will, there, and then be able to get you onto the platform pretty quickly. Everything's kosher, and you can get to what you guys.
So let's get to the second one. One of those disclosures, a lot of people say, I have talent attached. But it doesn't mean anything. I mean, there's no real legal attachment. It's just a verbal.
On the talent side, I think that, like I said, I think right now I can go up to Tom Cruise and be like, hey, you got this great movie. We want you on board. Let's do this. I want to attach it. I mean, you can do a letter of intent, which has little or no legal binding effect. But I think another producer sees that and they see that it's something. Or you can do a full-on option agreement. You could say, here's 10 grand. And we have an option to sign you for $1 million within 6 months or whatever.
But the public's, I think, if
Yeah.
I jump in,
How can you represent that?
And I think what you're getting into is the there's going to be a fair amount of litigation, and there's going to be issues. There's going to be hucksters. I've been in the SEC many times on this issue. Our regulatory committee worked very heavily on this one. It's going to be, if you're familiar with the Reg A offering, it's going to be a little closer to a Reg A probably as far as the onus. But there's definitely going to be obviously some issues there, and there's going to be diligence issues relative to your claims, whether we're talking about a widget or a film. It's still, is it true or is it not true? And I think in the portals, I know on Film Funder, when we do them next year, we're doing Jobs Act Title III equity. You will have to prove that up to us before you ever get on our platform. Because the platforms will be liable to a large extent. So there's some layers of liability issues that, and a lot of that's one of the reasons people say, what's taking the SEC so long? These things. We're creating an entire new industry, besides a lot of political reasons.
With financing
delay last year.
So the platforms were not able to lobby for not being liable for this and providing this technology and service, kind of like Google does.
They're going to be micro broker dealers, and you've got FINRA, and I don't know how much you guys want to get into detail of this, but you've got some regulators all the way down to the state regulators, which are very
But I think what's interesting is that they're not going to be able to provide an opinion or favor a certain campaign. And now there's a whole issue of whether if you appear first under the search results, whether that's kind of an endorsement or if they're kind of giving you an opinion. As you can see, there's a lot of technical issues.
I think we're going to find a gray there. That's a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, what's to determine whether you're the featured project of the day or anyone else? So it's going to be fun.
Let's take one last question from the audience and then thank our panelists. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Do you guys have any numbers on projects that start with initial financing and seed capital? And you can tell your crowd that you have a certain amount versus projects that start from the ground floor?
Well, I think you can, I don't have any numbers on how many companies do that, but I think that's the thing. You can really kind of,
in your experience.
I've done 2 film crowdfunding campaigns, and both of them already had funding. They were in different stages, and we were made one of them finishing funds. Both of them, I think, were finishing funds. And so, every film's going to be different, and if you already have cash, that's great. I mean, use it to your advantage.
You want to show
I would almost back up to it and say, I know you've already told me you'd give me this money, but do you mind if I call this a pledge and I can incentivize my crowd?
Like a soft circle.
Right. I mean, there's a way of doing. I'm not saying to be dishonest. I'm just saying, there's one thing because if you already have hard cash in the bank, then people judge all that and say, well, I don't know that he really needs any more money. But it's more powerful if you've got a pledge from someone saying, I will if the crowd will. Now you can use it as an incentive for the crowd.
What if it's your cash?
I think that kind of goes to his question in terms of just generally, whenever you're making any type of statement that's a commercial statement, not a political statement, you have a truth in advertising type of layer to it. And then when you're getting into the issue of saying that statement for the purpose of fundraising, you have much more heavily regulated, issues. I mean, you have a First Amendment right to lie, but not in this context. Not in the
And I would just go back to strategy. I mean, look what's happened on Zach. People are saying, well, he's got the money, he should be able to do it himself. Walking right out and saying, hey, I got this money set aside for this, but y'all give me a little bit more. It's like, well, is that going to help you? I'm not saying you shouldn't or whatever. It's just, there's marketing strategies.
There's a psychology behind it. But I think the issue, if just general psychology, you build momentum, you show other people that are moving of you, and others will too. Whether you're showing an investor first and taking that to the crowd, or whether you're showing the crowd first and then taking that to an investor, you can really play with these things and just.
Yeah, and if you look at the projects that have been here last year that actually successfully did Kickstarter campaigns and Indiegogo campaigns 2 and 3 years ago. So these were the early adopters. I'll tell you what happened to them. So one group has raised money for their first film straight out of the film school. They were on the panel last year. And they felt that they were seriously tapping into their friends and family network, which is the way we raise money for startups anyway, of every kind. And then they now want to raise money from the film equity funders, traditional way, pre-sales internationally, selling domestically, just like the way we've done it for all 100 years. They don't want to go back to this network, and they don't even have campaigns on Kickstarter. So, and then the second group raised money to do something that was a film project that had to do with doing good, like helping women in Nepal get out of poverty and get education, and they started a foundation to actually raise money for this education. They did not go back to the Kickstarter either, even though it was a fully funded campaign. They went on to get a branded integration partnership with American Apparel, where they created t-shirts with a little women's sign on top of Nepal, and they got money from them, and now they're funding it through other sources of funding, equity investors in the Valley and here. So it could be just the beginning of your portfolio, it could be just the beginning of your first project, or it may be a way to fund your projects forever, but you have to kind of understand in the realm of funding today, it does fall into that friends and family category, into that first step of funding. It is not, I would not say it's a second and third and fourth round of funding.
It's a $1 billion cap, so,
Well, that's just the job tax portion.
Right.
I wouldn't say what we're doing is necessarily friends and
And
family.
well, you're tapping into other sources of money, which is the follow-on rounds. But if you think of just pure, what we are addressing today, the
Right,
crowdfunding.
the smaller budget ones, absolutely.
Yeah. And this is really sort of your seed funding.
And
So
if I can
that's-
make one point before we go, because I know we got to wrap up.
And that makes it easier and less honors than maybe what we said today, okay? So think about it that way. So it gives you a perspective that it's not just going to be so complicated and convoluted, because it is your seed funding that can get you started on the way to getting your career going.
If I want to make one point before we wrap up today, I get frustrated, might be too strong a word, but if people want to get into crowdfunding, and the first thing I'm going to ask you if you come up and answer me is, how many projects have you backed? I encourage you, get out there, it's $20, come on people, get out there and find projects that inspire you, interest you, become a backer, feel what that feels like, support other people, and it's going to show too that you're a backer, important, when you start asking for money. So I really encourage people to engage in the community of crowdfunding. And if you're not ready for your own campaigns, yeah, fine, great. Get out there and support others.
There's a goodwill aspect to that, kind of feeling good about what you've done, and you kind of can have an understanding why people do it for you as well. We have last question, and we can wrap it up.
Real quick question. Let's say you did a crowdfunding campaign for a specific film, but films also have like life after, or projects have life after the film. And as for example, I'm doing a book about kids about the dropout epidemic. The film will have its run, whatever, wherever, but afterwards, I still want to raise money to help kids in the inner city. Can I use the film?
Yes.
Yes.
I can keep raising funds to start debate programs and anything?
Yes, that's what these guys did with the Nepal situation. Then they went out and started writing grants to raise, they started a foundation surrounding the film to then help the girls in Nepal get education. So that is a very good way to start something like that.
long as you're being candid and transparent about what you're using the money for, and you actually use the money for that, then, you know, sky's the limit.
So thank you very much for coming here the last day of the conference. Thank you, panelists, for great insights. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Oh, sure, yeah. Hold on, she's gonna take a picture.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Are you going to take notes? I'm going to take notes. Get your notes for you. Yes. I didn't say go. I thought
Thank you.
and you know what? I was just. Okay. No, I know. So who